at 7 o'clock. So if you have to come in and maybe finish talking, everybody come in, find a chair. The chairs that are facing the back, also look at this back screen so you won't be deprived of any information. My name is Ann Brashear, most of you probably know that. I am the president this year of the community club. Welcome. You also probably know I moved to this neighborhood in 1964. And I left, and then I came back, and it's dear to my heart. So here we are. Welcome to everybody. Great turnout. I want to introduce just our executive team, just our officers. We have a number of trustees scattered around. I'm not going to take the time. With her back to me, with the long brown hair, is our secretary, Ellen Henneman. And behind the AV panel over there is Shannon Johnson, our vice president. And yeah, social media, you name it. And the next person you're going to hear from is our treasurer and Rittenhouse. We have the chunk of stuff that I think people are most interested in tonight is what the city is doing with some of the land use regulations. And so we want to get as much of that as we can in. We have to, because we are trying to amend our bylaws, and our current bylaws say that the changes have to be presented to a general membership meeting and then another one. We're saving that bylaw discussion till the end, but we do need to save 20 minutes at the end. So the rest of the discussion, we're going to try and get it over with by 8:40. Okay? Ms. Rittenhouse.
Hi, everybody. Let me know if you can't hear me. So the first thing I'm going to do is just talk about our budget. This is our budget for this year. And one of the things that Ann also was suggesting is if you have questions, feel free to write them down. That's one of the reasons we left the tables up. So you can write down your questions and we'll take them at the end. And but this is our budget. And I think that's really it. If you have questions about it, I can take them at the end. But we're doing well. The only thing is we don't have a lot of actual income. We have a lot of money still in our savings account and our CD left over from previous years. So, but the board did decide not to raise our dues, but so many people have generously given more than their dues, which is what really helps us going and funds all of our great events like the egg hunt that's coming up, and the ice cream social and the garden walk and all the other things that we get to do throughout the year. And we appreciate that everybody does give more than just your membership dues. So thank you for that. Okay, well, I think that's all I really had to say about. Oh, you would like? Okay, I'm sorry. Ann would like. We need to approve the budget. So do I have a motion to approve the budget? Yes. Okay, thank you. Do I hear a second? Thank you very much. All those in favor of approving the budget? Thank you. Anyone opposed? All right. The budget is approved. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Okay. So Shannon's going to help me keep on track with, well, actually, thank you, Shannon. That's good to have this up. So these are the events I was just talking about that are coming up. We have sign-up sheets in the back for some of these if you'd like to help. One of the great things, too, is that if you have any students who need community service hours, we're glad to have them help as well. And so it really is a community club, and we do invite everybody to help. So we had some great kids come forward and help us pass out all the door hangers, which was very helpful. So, all right, thank you. And so the city of Bellevue is in the process of implementing many different initiatives. And some of us, our heads are just swimming with everything that's going on. On the table, you'll find a handout I did that talks about really 4 of the things that are going on in Bellevue all at one time. And The neighborhood area plan, we have a guest speaker who will talk to us about that from the City of Bellevue a little bit later. And then HOMA, the housing opportunities in the mixed use areas. We also have a guest speaker from Bellevue who will talk to us a little bit more about that. And then on top of all of that, there's an affordable housing initiative that the city is also implementing. And then on top of that, after all of that, so you know, we're getting a hit to the single-family neighborhood for every single one of these things. And then there's presently a law, and I should say an initiative in the state legislature, and it's House Bill 1245 that did pass and is moving on to the Senate, I believe. And it's another way they're going to increase density, and it's by lot splitting. So it's really kind of scary to look at, you know, we're going to get cut here and cut here and cut here and cut here, and that's not enough. We've still got this lot splitting bill that might be coming out. So that's one of the reasons why we're really trying to stay on top of some of this, and we encourage you to as well, because the City Council and the Planning Commission do get sick of hearing just from a few of us, and they want to hear from as many people as possible. And so the middle housing land use code amendment, this is very complicated, but on the table there is part of it. I did try to break it out for you. I also did a fold out in the back, an information board that talks about what's really going on. And it is true that this is being driven by state law, and that is true. Where the controversy is for many of us is that we see things in the state law that allows the City of Bellevue to take a more gentler approach to this, to slow down and think about what it means to our neighborhood and get more input from us. And it seems like that's not the, in the back, in the table, I printed out the actual staff comments to the City Council a week ago. And that's not the way they're interpreting this. They are like suggesting that we do more than what is the minimum required by the state. And so we really encourage you to read that, look at that. There's some handouts on the table that talk about what you can do and to kind of slow the process. And the big thing is ask the City of Bellevue, challenge them to do the right thing by us. Challenge them to take the same amount of time for this initiative that they did for Sound Transit. You may remember when Sound Transit came in, they drew a line and said, this is where we want to put the light rail, and the City of Bellevue wisely said, you know what? Let's think about this for a while. And they did, and they thought about it, and they came out with several alternatives to that straight line, and they asked us to vote on them and to give input on what we thought would be best for the City of Bellevue, and that's what we're asking them to do again. Slow down, give this the deliberation that it deserves, and listen and give us an opportunity to talk about how we would like this to fit into our neighborhoods. Right now, the big voices are the developers. There's no doubt about it. The developers have been at the table for 2 years, and they're driving a lot of what the city is suggesting. These are some examples of what could happen, and these are not figments of our imagination. Again, you can read the entire comments that the city has put together, and it really is scary. They want to permit at least 4 housing units on all residential lots. And again, this is throughout the City of Bellevue. They are not taking into account individual neighborhoods, like most streets in Newport Hills do not have sidewalks. And they're taking away parking. They're allowing the accessory dwelling units to go in without mandating off-street parking. So we already have a problem on many parts of our neighborhood where there are streets on the cars on the street, and then it's trash day. And then the trash cans go in front of those cars, and then our kids have to walk to get to the bus stop, and they have to walk in the street to get to their bus stop. So there are provisions in the state law that say that some of these things should not be allowed if it's going to cause a health or safety hazard in our neighborhood. And our position is, yeah, it's gonna. And so we need to stop and look at some of these things. This is what the initial proposal was in the right hand. The middle column is what the current draft code proposal is. And they actually have taken a pin mark and stuck it in where there is frequent transit service, which we all know does not exist in Newport Hills. We have the 240 bus that runs occasionally, and that's about it. And so we do not have a mass transportation hub in our area at all, but they're treating us just like they are Crossroads and some of the other neighborhoods that have transportation hubs. And then they stuck a pin in and they drew a circle around it, a radius of 1/4 mile for some of these different things. Well, in Newport Hills, how many streets do we have that do not go through? They're just dead ends, they're cul-de-sacs. And so you have to walk around to get there. So the 1/4 mile that they have circled is not a 1/4 mile in our neighborhood. Now, it may be true in some neighborhoods, but it's not true in our neighborhood. And also the 1/4 mile of that is actually the community, the business shopping centers is what that is, when they're talking about centers, that's what they mean. But this is what they're saying, nine dwelling units can be put on one lot. And back in the back on my poster board, I did give an example. I went and looked at it of a lot that went up in South Park, and 3 of these units are still for sale, so this is really current information. They demolished a single-family home, put up 6 2-story units, so there's 750 square feet at lots, and then they are 800 square foot houses, 2-story, 400 on each level. No off-street parking, no lawns, nothing. And each one of these units sells for $360,000. I'm sorry, $460,000. So what you would have to do, and this is all based on the Realtors.com listing for this actual home, you would have to come up, someone would have to come up with $110,000 to move into one of those. That's 20% down, and then 4% closing costs. And that's if you have good credit, and if you can come up with that amount down, and then your house payment after that would be $3,000 a month. So our point is, have they looked at these? Have they gone out? And who is this helping, really? It's destroying neighborhoods. Oh, and by the way, there's only 1 tree on this entire lot, and it's down by the street.
Did you say there are 6 of those?
There's
on
6.
On a lot?
On one single family lot, that's correct. And the thing that's interesting about this particular example, they at least have an alleyway in the back, so they have access for garbage cans. So the trash can be picked off of an alley, so the trash cans are not out front. And you can see when I took this picture, I made sure you could see this lot at least has a sidewalk. We don't have that in most of Newport Hills. We don't have sidewalks, and we certainly don't have an alley. So this is just one example of how we really need to stress to the city, slow down and take your time. Make us proud of what you can do. The city of Bellevue has done so many wonderful things, and right now they're looking at the big Grand Connection, and they're putting more time into the Grand Connection, and they put all this time into the Sound Transit link rail final line than they are in this, and this is going to so much more impact all of us. So that's why this is a little bit of a call to arms and call to action. We need everybody to write to them, and there's dates up here when the next meetings are going to be in the land use. So there's a lot going on, and I apologize that I'm going through it so quickly because some of it is really heavy, but this is all true. You know, they just did a new tree a code, and now that's going to get thrown away too, because they're allowing trees to come up setbacks. This is the thing that, the increased heights of buildings going up. Setbacks are crazy. They're going to let setbacks go from 10 feet down to 5 feet. So not only are they sticking this density in, but we aren't going to have any buffers. So it really is a big issue. And so what can you do? We've got some handouts out there, and you can contact right now, this is going before the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission then will make a recommendation to City Council. A lot of us have been meeting with Planning Commission members and with City Council members. And even if you can't do that, at least send them an email. And there is a sample that actually my husband wrote. He didn't put his name on it, but he did let me use a sample of what he chose to talk about and what he sent to both the Planning Commission and the City Council. Attend the City Council meetings. This is a really big thing. The next meeting is March 25th for City Council, and then the Planning Commission's meeting is on March 26th. And beyond that, we've got a petition in the back that we'd love to have you sign. The Planning Commission is going to be having a public hearing on April 9th. And that, again, if you don't feel good about talking in front of people, just show up. And if somebody from your community says something that you agree with, just give them, we do a quiet hands in the council chambers and in the meetings to show our support. And they see that and they know that we're agreeing with this person talking without being disruptive. So it's another way. Another thing to do is spread the word to all your neighbors. This is citywide, and that's another really big bone of contention, is that we are not all the same neighborhoods. And so Wilburton is different, Crossroads is different, Lake Heights is different, Eastgate is different. Every neighborhood is very unique. And actually it says in the law that they're supposed to look at our neighborhoods and try to preserve as much of our individuality as they can. And that isn't really quite being communicated. In fact, after we sent our note to the City Council, I had a City Council person, I won't say whether it's a man or woman, call me, and we had a really nice 20-minute talk on the phone. They did not know that they could petition or actually just ask the state for an extension on this. It doesn't have to be done as quickly as staff is leading them to believe it has to be done. So we're trying to make sure that good information is getting to our commissioners and to our City Council so that good decisions will be made for our neighborhood. Okay, well, I think that's it for my presentation. Are there any more slides I was supposed to talk about, Shannon?
No.
I think I'm done. All right, and Ann, do you want to introduce our...
I would love to.
Okay, the other Ann.
As Ann said, there is a petition that's at the back table, not out in the lobby, but it's really to ask the city to just slow down. So I would love to introduce, let's see, this is Matthew Menard, and he is the city planner who is working on what we call HOMA. HOMA stands for Housing Opportunities in Mixed-Use Areas, one of which is our commercial district up here. On the top of the hill, the Newport Hill Shopping Center property, the S-Mart property, and the Jack's Dog Drop property. Those are all, right? That's considered a neighborhood center. And so the things that Matthew's going to talk about would apply here. And we'll get to
Hi everyone, as Ann mentioned, I'm Matthew. I work with the City of Bellevue. I am a code and policy planner there, so my job is to write a lot of the land use code. So I'm going to give you a presentation on what we're calling HOMA, which is looking to increase housing in mixed-use areas throughout the city. So this does apply to the whole city, not just Newport Hills, but I'll focus in on Newport for this presentation.
Okay, so just louder.
You can move through the agenda here, and we'll just get through the presentation. Go on to the next one, Jen. So some context for this presentation. The city has recently adopted a new comprehensive plan that was adopted last fall. Including in that comprehensive plan is a whole set of new policy and new policy guidance for the city, as well as what we call a future land use map. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute here. It really sets the stage for the next 20 years of the city, including the growth strategy for the city as well. In that comprehensive plan, the city is planning for 35,000 new housing units by 2044. We are targeting 5,700 new affordable housing units in the next 10 years. So this land use code amendment is building on those goals, especially around affordable housing and some market rate housing as well. As I mentioned, we are aligning with those new policy goals. So what we're really trying to do with this land use code amendment is create more diverse housing opportunities. Right now, Bellevue has a majority of one single type of housing, which is our single family homes. We're trying to diversify that a little bit in these mixed-use centers, many of which are like Newport in sort of the strip mall development type with no housing, trying to encourage more housing in these areas throughout the city. With that, we are also proposing some requirements for incentives for affordable housing, so trying to expand those affordable housing options throughout the city. We know housing in Bellevue is extraordinarily expensive, so making sure there is that provision of affordable housing for those people that do want to live here and work in this community but can't afford housing in the community. With that, we are trying to foster well-served neighborhoods. That means neighborhoods where you can walk to your daily needs, or live near your daily needs, or live near where you work. A lot of this is trying to increase the vibrancy of these areas by having people in these areas, and having people on the sidewalks, and have people, what we say, eyes on the street, so watching the street from their house on the second story or above. The comprehensive plan also determines the appropriate use and scale of these neighborhoods through that future land use map. So what is a future land use map? Some of you may have seen this, but in the comprehensive plan there's a map of the whole city of Bellevue, and it lays out what the future land uses for those areas should be. That is a guide to what those areas should be. When we talk about zoning and we talk about the land use code, which is what I work on, that is a regulation, so it's what those areas must be once it gets to this point. But when it's just a future land use map, it's only a guide. It's a recommendation that we turn into regulation. So it is future-oriented, which means it sets out something that may not be on the site at that time. At this point in time, you can see the white areas in that picture is the Newport Hill Shopping Center, and the S-Mart is low-rise mixed-use 1. Current zoning is consistent with that. There is some flexibility with that, which I'll talk about tonight. So we're not proposing a new zoning district for this area, but we are proposing to change some of the dimensional standards related to these areas, again, to encourage more housing. So I mentioned that gets translated into zoning, which is the regulations that sort of set the box that you can build in. So things like building heights, building setbacks, what uses can be on the property, how much parking is required. All of this is included in what we call the land use code. Often it's called a zoning code for a city. Right now, the Newport Hill Shopping Center and all the areas you see in orange on that map, which are going to be the areas that are impacted by this LUCA. This LUCA doesn't impact any areas that are not in orange up there, so it's only the mixed-use areas of the city. Right now, it's zoned neighborhood business, which is one of our lower density mixed-use areas in the city. This won't impact any of the single-family areas, so all that area in sort of light yellow you can see on there is not going to be impacted. It doesn't interact with the middle housing LUCA in any way. This is really just focusing on those areas that allow both commercial and residential uses in them. So what is HOMA, or Housing Opportunities in Mixed-Use Areas? So it's a land use code amendment, as I mentioned, aimed at getting more housing in these mixed-use areas. There are a few mixed-use areas that are excluded from this project. Wilburton is excluded. It has a project ongoing right now with some pretty major zoning changes. Bel-Red is excluded as it is about to have a land use code amendment with some pretty major zoning changes, and East Main is excluded as it was just updated. Otherwise, every single mixed-use area in the city is included in this land use code amendment, and we'll be looking at those standards that are inhibiting housing development in these areas. It will also include an affordable housing program. We will give Planning Commission 2 options for an affordable housing program. One will be a mandatory option, where anytime a developer builds on the property, they will have to provide affordable housing with that. And one will be a voluntary option, which will be some sort of incentive. We are proposing an incentive of additional floor area ratio, or additional building size, or additional building height. Shannon, can you go back a couple slides for me here? Keep going back. Yeah, one more forward, thank you. And one more forward. one more. Thank you. So all the areas in the city you can see in orange there are included in HOMA. There are several different zoning districts that are included in this. As I mentioned, the Newport Hill Shopping Center and adjacent properties are zoned neighborhood business. There are other areas in the city that are also zoned neighborhood business, which these same standards would apply to areas such as Northtown, which is north of downtown. There's some small areas that many of them contain supermarkets right now, scattered throughout town. We will also be rezoning those areas that are inconsistent with the future land use map. That does not include the shopping center, but it does include areas like Factoria and the Crossroads Mall as well. And we will really be looking at, for this area, updates to those dimensional standards. The sort of major changes are floor area ratio, which is basically how big of a building you can build on site, and building height are the two main changes with this zoning code amendment. And now, Shannon, we can move on to the next one. As I mentioned, we will be recommending two different options that Planning Commission will choose from. One is a mandatory option. That option we will be proposing what we proposed in Overton as well. So there'll be a requirement of at least 10% affordable housing if that housing is provided at 80% of the area median income. Area median income is essentially a HUD calculation that shows that you make 80% of what the median income in the area is, as you'd expect. It drops if you give a lower AMI. So the lower your AMI is, basically the lower your income is. So if you provide, yeah, go ahead.
Quick question before you move from this slide. Will you tell the group what feed in lieu option means?
Yes, I will go through, I will definitely tell you. So basically with the mandatory option, it'll be based on the AMI level and how much housing is required, but it requires that any time a developer build a building with more than 10 units, that they must provide affordable housing in that building or pay this fee in lieu. So fee in lieu, essentially, instead of putting affordable housing on site, you pay the city into basically a city fund so that the city can provide affordable housing in lieu of you providing that affordable housing. So that's what that means. We have a set of proposed fees for the fee in lieu. It's based on a square foot calculation. We are also proposing a commercial fee with this as well to go towards affordable housing. The other option is a voluntary option, which means it's an incentive for developers to build affordable housing on site, but there's no requirement for developers to build on site. In this case, it would be allowing them to build larger buildings, both in size and in height, with the starting of the building height and the starting building size being smaller than it would be with option A, and they'd have to earn up to the same building size as option A. So we are looking at form changes, as I mentioned. Really, again, we're looking at form changes to those districts that are not supporting housing. NB is a prime example of a district that is not supporting housing right now. Based on our zoning standards, you can only build a building that's 2 stories tall, and it can only be 2 stories if the second story is residential. That doesn't work economically for developers to build housing in these areas, which is why all these areas currently have single-story commercial developments with large parking lots, because that's what the zoning sort of leads them towards. We're trying to update the zoning to lead them towards mixed-use developments that have commercial on the ground floor and residential above that, and hopefully structured parking in some of these areas as well. So trying to really encourage more housing in these areas as they do redevelop, or if they do redevelop, rather than redeveloping or maintaining these strip malls which don't provide the housing we need in these areas. We do want to make sure, and we've heard this loud and clear, especially from this neighborhood, that these areas are the sort of retail center and the gathering center of the neighborhood, and we do want to make sure that that retail element and that sort of gathering element is maintained as these areas redevelop. We know that's very important to people throughout the city. So we can move on to the next slide. Can we just wait? And I will have tons of time to answer all your questions, so I will get to your questions. So the form changes proposed specifically for this area. We are proposing under option A 45-foot building height, which is going to be about 4 stories, potentially 3 if it's mixed use. If you provide us an additional 5% of affordable housing, you can lift that building height to 60 feet, which is going to be a 5-story building in a mixed-use building. When you have retail on the first floor, it's often 12 to 15 feet. So that 60 feet is a 5-story first floor retail, next 4 stories of residential. Option B is the same, but you will have to provide a certain amount of affordable housing as an incentive rather than a requirement. We are looking at 2 FAR, and what FAR is floor area ratio. It's the area of floor space to your lot. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot and the FAR is 2, you can build a 20,000 square foot building, is essentially what that means. So for the shopping center, for example, they can build twice the amount of floor area of the building as the size of the lot. Option B is going to be start at 1, and then if you can earn your way up to 2 FAR if you provide affordable housing. The other changes, the transition areas are changing and being moved to a new section. Right now there are very restrictive height limits in the transition areas, which are suppressing housing development. They also don't make sense currently with how high the neighboring multifamily is. The multifamily can actually be as high or higher than some of the transition areas. So we're moving that height limit and allowing them to go to the maximum building height in the area, but maintaining the setback that's required. So the proposal right now is if you are in a mixed-use district and you are adjacent to a residential district, your building must be at least 25 feet from that property line that is adjacent to the residential district. We are maintaining the landscaping standards from those transition areas as well, so that 25-foot area will have to be landscaped to create some of that visual in space and open space buffer between those 2 uses. We're not changing any commercial parking, but we are slightly reducing the residential parking to 1 space per unit for residential. Right now it starts at 1.2 if you have a studio or 1 bedroom, and slides all the way up to 1.8 if you have a 3-bedroom unit. We are requiring what we're calling pedestrian-oriented uses, so that's uses that are going to generate foot traffic along the street frontage, or a certain percent of the street frontage. Really trying to create that vibrant neighborhood while maintaining that neighborhood center that we've heard so much about, making sure that there are those retail uses, those other uses in these areas that are going to bring people into the center of that neighborhood. And we are changing some of the site requirements with lot coverage updates. The impervious surface requirements for coverage are not proposed to be changed, but some of the structure coverages are proposed to be changed. We are requiring pedestrian connections to adjacent open space if there is any on any of these lots. Next steps for this, I think this is probably going to be important for you all. We are holding a planning commission meeting on this on March 26th. This will be the first meeting we are presenting the full strike draft to them. The strike draft basically contains all of the proposed changes for this zoning update. You can also find that it's currently available to the public on our website, which is just bellevuewa.gov/HOMA. You can look at all of those changes as well. You can also make comments to Planning Commission, as Ann mentioned, which is planningcommission@bellevuewa.gov is their email. So that meeting is coming up. The process for us, anytime we do a land use code amendment, it goes to Planning Commission. Planning Commission then holds a public hearing, which has to be publicly noticed, and provide time for comments. After that public hearing, Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council, and City Council will make the final adoption of the code amendment, sort of at their discretion. Time frame is up in the air right now for that. If Planning Commission were to direct us to hold a public hearing at the meeting next week, we're probably looking at summer for final adoption. If that doesn't happen, we're probably looking at fall for final adoption with this. Next slide. Just maybe my contact information. So I'm always happy to take comments as well, or any questions you have. I'm also happy to meet with people if they do want to set up a meeting with me. Comments can also be sent to the Planning Commission. As mentioned, I also get those comments, so I get to see those. I think we've had 3 comments relating specifically to Newport so far. So I always encourage people to make those comments to Planning Commission, regardless of what those comments are. It helps us make these code amendments better. And with that, I am available for any questions you all have. And do you want a microphone up right there?
Right? You're going to shout, and I'll get the microphone. So you're providing outs for affordable housing. Are you going to provide outs for retail? I'm also concerned with, and developers don't want to have to be landlords to retail. It's easier to just sell condos, so they're going to want to get out of that. So are they going to be able to pay, and then we just have like one little Starbucks or something, and then...
So no, you cannot deviate from required, what we're calling pedestrian-oriented uses along the street frontage. Right now, the proposal is to require that at least 50% of the street frontage be that use. We are also proposing some incentives around exempting them from floor area ratio for specific uses that we report are very important to neighborhoods. So those are grocery stores, childcare, nonprofit organizations, I'm forgetting one. And so those will be encouraged further through the code amendment as well. Affordable commercial spaces.
How much of the recommendation that we see are being shared with the developers, and how much input do they have in the framework that we get to see and understand, to see where the businesses are coming in with their proposals and what you present at the end of the day?
So everything we do is public, so everyone can see everything we do, essentially. We've been meeting with development entities, especially around all of the shopping centers in the city throughout this process. Our first phase was really looking at what parts of the code are inhibiting housing development. And so speaking to developers about specifics in the code that tell them that they can't build housing has been very helpful through this process. But they're aware of the code changes, they know what's going on. We take their input like we take everybody else's inputs. They get to make comments to Planning Commission like everybody else gets to make comments to Planning Commission. But it's not like there's some sort of competing set of strike drafts. The strike drafts come from the city. Developers could submit strike drafts, I guess, if they wanted to Planning Commission, but it wouldn't come from us. Our strike draft is coming from us and what we think best achieves the goal of the project to encourage more housing in these areas.
We've got a question here.
Thanks, Matt. What about the restrictive covenants?
We're not touching covenants. Covenants are a private contract. It's not something the city's going to get
They're
involved in.
on the face of the plat. About every plat in this city has restrictive covenants. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So those haven't been removed. So how do you deal with those? Because that is a legal document, as recorded.
So the covenants will impact this project less because it is in these commercial areas. It's a private legal contract. It's not a contract held between the city and private entities. So the city, at this point, is not getting involved in those covenants.
So you're planning for something that has no legal use.
The discussion on the legality of covenants and how it interacts with zoning is not one that impacts HOMA, and I'm not going to have that discussion right now. We can have it after if you want, but it's not particularly relevant to HOMA. It's much more relevant to middle housing.
Yeah, please.
So we're not going to have that discussion right now.
We're not discussing middle housing right now.
Who else has a question?
What is considered affordable?
Yes, that is a very good question. Yes, so what is considered affordable is defined in the land use code. Right now it's defined as anything, basically an affordable housing unit is someone making 80% area median income or less, and that area median income is defined by HUD for the metropolitan area, and it's based on household size. So there's sort of a range of area median incomes depending on how large your household is. So if you, to qualify as an affordable housing unit in Bellevue under the land use code, it has to be affordable to someone making 80% of AMI or area median income or less, and they can't spend any more than 30% of their income on housing. And that's what qualifies as affordable housing. And when you get a bonus from the city through our affordable housing programs, you have to basically record something with us that says that that unit will be affordable for the life of the building.
And is it HUD?
No, these would all be reserved through us. We do use HUD definitions of area median income, but this is all the city. There are several entities that provide affordable housing in the city. A great example of that is the King County Housing Authority.
Is there any thought of underground parking?
In some areas, there will be underground parking in downtown. Underground parking is hugely expensive, usually about $150,000 per parking space. So a lot of these areas, such as Newport Hills, it's just not economically viable to do underground parking. We are trying to change the development standards to encourage more structured parking, so parking garages instead of these big surface lots. Again, there's a big cost difference between a surface lot and a structured parking area, but trying to encourage more buildings and less parking lot on these sites as well.
Question here.
Yeah, I got a comment and then I've got two questions. You had said in your presentation that when you change the zoning or regulations for the business area, it has no impact on the neighborhoods surrounding it. That's incorrect. Any change you make to the business area is going to automatically affect the neighborhood. So I I don't know why you would include that comment. Okay, so.
Can I address that before you answer questions? Not that it doesn't have any impact on the neighborhoods, it's just we're not changing the zoning in the beyond the Newport Shopping Center.
Then I would recommend that you use that in your presentations and don't state that there's no change because there will be. Okay. First question is how is affordable housing subsidized?
Depends on the type of affordable housing. For something like a mandatory affordable program, often it's subsidized through slightly higher rents and the rest of the units in the building. There are many nonprofits in the area that operate. There's also government entities that operate housing. Those all derive funding differently. Some of it comes from the federal government, some of it comes from nonprofit fundraising, some of it comes from the city, some of it comes from what we call ARCH, which is a regional coalition for housing. So all the Eastside communities pay money into that. So there's a lot of various funding sources. Amazon has just dedicated $100 million to housing, so it's very varied on how they get paid for.
Yeah, it's affordable for everybody else. My last question is in looking at your new zoning regulations and so on and so forth, they should be have you done any preliminary traffic studies at all? Because there's going to be huge impacts. In this neighborhood, there's only what you've got. You can't expand it. So is that included in any of your zoning proposal?
Yeah, so it's something we looked at. It's not something that zoning addresses directly. We have looked at impacts through our environmental impact statement that was done with a comprehensive plan. Really the goal of these is to make that sort of more compact neighborhood so more people can get out of their cars and walk to these areas and walk around the neighborhood. We are aware that traffic is an issue and continues to be an issue, especially up here.
What you just said is, to put it delicately, through these plans, it just occurs to me that the city and the staff are driving these plans basically down our throats, irregardless of our concerns. So you're trying to change a culture, right, that people don't want to change by walking to what? A bunch of apartments? Walk from where? See what I mean? I'm not directing this at you personally. I'm just saying as a general term, you're trying to change the culture in our neighborhood that we don't want. Let's just say this moves forward and you have 4 stories and ground floor lead line. What incentive is there going to be for the current people that have these businesses to be able to stay here? You've got a bunch of mom and pop stores that we use every day, every week. We've lost a lot. We've lost a lot for different reasons. But we want these small businesses to stay. We want to support them and continue to support them. So what incentive is there to say, I have to be able to afford to move in a brand new building and pay the new rates, while charging the same price to my customers? That's not going to work.
Yeah, so there's a couple of incentives. One of the incentives is we've been told basically in that sort of timeline between an old building and a new building, a lot of businesses don't come back. Right? You can't wait for 2 years for the new building to get built after the old building gets knocked down. So there's a couple of changes to the code, especially around phased parking that we've made to allow the old building hopefully to stay on site while a new building gets built in the parking lot to maintain those businesses. There's also an incentive for affordable commercial space, which hopefully will encourage those businesses to come back when that new building is built because they can afford that space. Whether or not developers will use that incentive, I'm not sure. We're obviously hopeful. We've also been working with our economic development department to see what kind of financial incentives there could be potentially to prevent the displacement of this business or these businesses. And it's something that's high on our radar. A lot of that is going to come through some sort of financial incentive, which is not something you do through the land use code, but will be coming through our economic development department. I know they're working on a plan right now, or they're in the process of beginning a plan to look at some of those financial incentives and what we can do to retain those businesses. It's something that we are very well aware of and trying to accommodate some of these staying on site if possible.
Hey Matthew, my name is Paul. Just want to know how many units for the Newport Hill Shopping Center, and how many people are you estimated to come to the area?
It's going to vary widely depending on what gets built for the building. So the city's not going to develop the site, right? So it's not in our control. There are certain plans. I'm not sure the unit count, and it depends greatly on the size of the unit. So it just really depends on what gets built there. So I don't have any numbers for you right now, especially as this isn't finalized. I know there's a developer that's been sort of working on sketch plans. I don't know if any of you have seen any of those, or if those have been made available to the public. I'm not quite sure, but I would definitely encourage this group to reach out to them and see what their potential plans might be for that area if it were to new zoning were to get adopted.
All right, thank you. And last question is, will it affect the value of your taxes if it gets developed?
It shouldn't affect your taxes because the zoning isn't changing. Again, the city doesn't really run the taxes. That's up to the county to assess the property values. From HOMA, I wouldn't expect a major impact. Middle housing might be a different story, but I'm not quite sure on that one. It's definitely something to probably ask the county about, to be quite honest. They run the assessment and they sort of set the value that you pay for taxes.
All right, thank you.
Lady in the purple?
Yeah, my name is Faye, and I have a question. My first question is about contradiction with the existing plan.
Give her the microphone.
HOMA contradicting your 2024 comprehensive plan which we amended. So the question about contradiction with your 2024. Sorry, yeah. My question is about the contradiction with your existing 2044 comprehensive plan, which you recommend a cap neighborhood center designed mixed-use lower one for the 2 to 4 story instead of your HOMA currently proposed with 3 to 6 story building. Why is that? Why is contradiction with your existing comprehensive plan?
I'm not sure where you're getting that language, but it's not from the comprehensive plan. So that language is not anywhere in the comprehensive plan. I did look it up again after that comment was made to the Planning Commission at the last Planning Commission meeting. There's no reference to stories in the comprehensive plan. There is a section in the comprehensive plan that talks about low-rise mixed-use 1, which is this district on the future land use map, that talks about sort of a low building height and scale, but that's as specific as it gets. So we do think this is consistent with not only the future land use map, but also the housing element of the comprehensive plan, which is very clear on trying to encourage housing supply and diversity and affordable housing, and the urban design element, which is trying to create more walkable neighborhoods.
Well, I have two-phase question now. Between the initial comprehensive plan, building height, and the new building height, what is the difference there? Well, the old building height was 30 feet, and the new building height is 60 feet. That would speak to how many stories you're going to fit in there. So we just take away the stories number and ask the height question. Can you rephrase like that?
So the comprehensive plan does not talk about specific heights anywhere in the comprehensive plan. So the question was, the old height is 30 feet, the new height is proposed to be 60 feet. Can we talk about the feet rather than stories? So yes, the new height is proposed, to be 45 feet, and then 60 feet to provide an additional 5% of affordable housing, again trying to encourage affordable housing. There's no reference in the comprehensive plan to specific feet or building heights. There's just sort of the statement about the form of the building, which is low building height and scale.
And then an add-on to that, my question was, I felt like the photograph you had up there of the overlay commercial use. In the overlay, it looks great from that angle because you've got the lower land and it's kind of right as it goes away. But the back side of that is not true. It's like a wall. And so homes that are on the back side of these developments are completely overshadowed by the Great Wall of China. Basically, it's huge. So can you speak to how that can be addressed?
So we're addressing that through what we're calling transition they're called transition areas now. So what we will require if the property, Newport Hill Shopping Center is a great example of this. So you have Newport Hill Shopping Center, and to the east there's the multifamily district, so it's a residential district. So in that interface, we will require that the buildings be 25 feet from that property line, as well as having landscaping between that property line and the building to offset that sort of wall effect and break it up with some landscaping and trees.
Will you require modulation of the units all on that backside?
There will not be required, I shouldn't say there will not, there's no proposed required modulation on the backside of buildings. Modulation is something we've heard is tricky when you're building wood frame buildings, because they need straight walls for the most part, so we haven't recommended any of that. It's definitely something, if you are interested in something like that, it's definitely something I would recommend writing a letter to the planning commission and letting them know. It's something they could recommend that we add to the draft.
So, my question is about parking, Jane Manfred, because parking and traffic and safety really in the neighborhood all interface together, I think we all can agree. And when you described, there were a couple of words you used, hopefully the developers will build parking, and then it was they can build one stall or one parking per unit. Of course, there may be the assumption that those units are just one bedroom or studios or whatever, so the ratio is 1:1. That isn't usually how that works. It might be one for a 2-bedroom, so now where does that second car go? That second car is going to go onto the surface streets in front of other people's homes, where those of us that live here now have to walk around. It's just a fact. So how would the city then try to address, and to be quite frank, then enforce, because it's one thing to have a code, it's another thing to then live with the result of what was allowed to be done. And that's beyond, I know, probably your scope, but if you get, and it's no insult to developers, because without them we wouldn't have homes, we wouldn't have apartments, we wouldn't have places to do business. But they will build to the least common denominator provided to them, because it's a money equation. So how is the city gonna kind of work with that?
Sure. So hopefully the developers will build structured parking. They will be required to build parking. They will be required to build one parking space per unit under this proposal.
But you don't know the number of bedrooms per unit.
We do not. So yes, the proposed change is to stop basically regulating number of parking spots by number of bedrooms in the unit and just give one set of parking standards for all bedrooms. That's completely accurate. It's the thing I expect to hear most about when we go to planning commission, to be quite frank, because parking is often the thing we hear most about. We do think in these areas where you have commercial parking that's required as well, there is some overlap in use between those residential uses and those commercial uses that are not necessarily filled after a certain time at night, so there won't be quite as much spillover parking because of that. A lot of the on-street parking in Bellevue is legal on-street parking. People are allowed to be there. So it's not something the city is going to take enforcement action on if the parking is allowed to be there, if the cars are allowed to be there. If the cars are parked illegally, that's something that the police department will handle.
One more question. On that property in Victoria on Poultry. The white ones. How come that isn't being used for high-density low-income housing?
Well, it's got an existing use on it. It is part of this code change. We cannot evict existing uses and change their use. I mean,
It doesn't look like anything's going on.
I think there's things going on in there, but they are part of the HOMA. So their zone and effectoria zone, it's a mixed-use zone. So they will be subject to these code changes as well. What gets used on that property is up to the private property owner. The city does not get involved in what happens on private property. Like we wouldn't get involved in building something on the Newport Hill Shopping Center. We're not going to get involved in sort of what's happening on private property. We just set the box that you can build in, essentially.
You know what, ma'am, to answer your question, those are luxury townhomes, foreign investor, and they lost their funding during the pandemic, and they're trying to get their funding again. But they sat and rotted for a long time before they were wrapped up, and we did have a planning commissioner that asked about why those didn't get rezoned and actually used for something like what they're proposing to put here instead of those luxury townhomes, but they went through and ripped out the entire green belt there. So good question.
Are there any other impact studies that you guys are that can be responsible for, that can be given to the people? That way we can have a better understanding of the various things that are going to happen. Because I think people have spoken to traffic that's going to impact noise, increased volume of cars and all that stuff. Are there any other impact studies that can be done and presented that way to give us more data?
So there is a massive impact study. We have one project that's required by state law. We are using the one that was done for the comprehensive plan. So that is a comprehensive study of all the impacts of the proposed changes to the comprehensive plan. With that, we do need to submit to our environmental coordinator to make sure that that environmental impact study covers this project as well. If it doesn't cover this project, we will change our project to make sure that those impacts were analyzed under that EIS. That EIS is available on our website. If you go to the City of Bellevue's comprehensive plan website, there's a little box at the bottom that says something like past initiatives or past projects or something like that. And if you open the box, you can download a PDF of that EIS. It's available to the public.
So to piggyback off of the last question, because the city has the EIS, is the city already in the process of looking at existing utilities, roadways, sidewalks, and looking at maybe upgrades so that existing neighborhoods can meet the incoming density needs? And then my second part of the question would be, with HOMA, the developer is working on a new development for a property, what will be the public process for that? Will there be public process that enables neighbors to see the designs as they're moving through the process and be able to comment on them?
Yeah, so the city is constantly looking at transportation improvements. We have a capital improvement plan that sort of lays those out for quite a long time frame. As I'm sure you all are aware, capital improvements, especially roadways, are hugely expensive, so they're sort of spread out over long periods of time, and there's sort of a limited number we can do. I believe that capital improvements plan is available to the public. We might be updating it as we speak. I'm not so sure about that. But you can see sort of what those capital improvements we've laid out for the time being are. There may be some adjustments that get made with that as some of these state laws come online and some more density come online, and that sort of things change in the city. But right now we have, we do a lot of planning documents to let the public know sort of what we're working on next, and the capital improvements plan is one of those projects specific to transportation. Second question was, remind me the second question.
Public process for the redevelopment of HOMA.
It depends on the project. So there's certain thresholds in the city where you have to go through SEQA review for a site-specific project. If it meets those thresholds, there's a public process. If it's under that threshold, there's likely not a public process. It's just allowed by right.
Yeah, how do you guys work with the county for bus transit to get out of an area when the density gets to a certain level? And do you guys put a certain requirement on that, or does the county put a certain requirement on that? And can there be more than one bus? If 240 just takes you to Eastgate, and then you, my God, and you gotta wait there for another one to go there, and then, yeah.
It takes 2 hours.
Yeah, can we get one that takes you downtown and you can jump on the light rail?
Yeah, so,
Sorry,
yeah, you're good. Talk to King County Metro. The city obviously coordinates a lot with them. They basically, it's going to be a threshold on how many people and how sort of efficient that bus line is often. So,
and does the county define that, or does the city define that?
King County Metro or Sound Transit, depending, will be the ones that make the final call on where the transportation lines go. But they do work with us, obviously.
Matthew, Heidi's been waiting quite a while for we.
So I just wanted to make a couple of points. I was really glad that somebody up front mentioned the kind of the Great Wall of China, because is there anybody here from the townhomes? Okay, you'll get the Great Wall of China, because currently we have what's called Transition Design District that requires 150 feet between those changing zones, the low-rise townhomes and what can be at the shopping center, same with the Newport and stuff. So the design district, the transition is much, much greater at this point. you mentioned fee in lieu, and how, what I've seen is many of the developers choose to do fee in lieu, so it goes into the arch pot and gets built in other cities. Right of return with the retail, they can't come back, even though they have right of return, they can't come back. Also, how many of you would like to age in place and be able to stay here in the neighborhood? Okay, so here's the deal. I thought it was interesting, Matthew, that you brought up that there's a developer kind of doing plans. I had suspected that the shopping center owner, because they still won't come back to the table with the developer they were under contract with in October of 2019, before the pandemic. Let me finish. And that developer is a senior living company that would do independent retirement, assisted living, memory care, and they have a retail partner. And they will not come back to the table because they are waiting for this to go through. So I wanted to let you know about that, because we are being held hostage by the owners of our shopping center.
Just for clarity on the transition area. So the transition area applies to an area within 150 feet of the property line. The current setback is 30 feet from the property line.
I just want to say one quick thing to tag on to the gentleman over there who talked about the culture up here. I just want to say something else. It's not just the culture, it's the reality. The geography. And so it's not, sometimes culture, you can change things, but you can't change the geography of Newport Hills. And the transportation that's coming down the pipe, at some point there's a transportation problem, that's not going to do us any good. We have only these many roads, and that's it, to get off of our hill. So it's even goes beyond our culture. The city built a suburban neighborhood, and that's what we've lived with, and that's what we've grown with, and that's what we all are dependent on. And we do have to go off the hill in a car, because we only have that one stupid bus and 240 that doesn't do any of us really hardly any good. Anyways, that was my point, that it's not just a culture, it's a reality that we live on a hill with only 3 roads going off of it.
I agree with that. That was my point too, is that I don't understand how the city can change zoning and give permission to build a certain structure and increase the population so much, but not change the roads. And or now if you change the roads, talk about changing our culture. We don't want to live right in, like we're on the freeway going through a nice little city.
And another thing, this is just the beginning, because then there's the whole LUCA that I was talking about that's coming down the pipe. Then there's the whole affordable housing, and then the state is thinking about doing lot splitting, so it's not just this. And that's a little bit of what the problem is. We've got 4 or 5 major housing things going on by the city. So, we may get screwed by this, and then we're going to get screwed by that, we're going to get screwed by all these other ones, and then where will we be?
In regards to this is quite a small percentage of overall housing in the city, so it'll have, not a huge impact overall on the number of units, especially compared to something like middle housing or the HOMA. I'm talking about HOMA, I'm not talking about middle housing. Compared to either the existing number of units on the hill or what's potential for middle housing. This is a much smaller number.
Rainfall has been mothballed by the school district as well. So again, you're talking about our shopping center, and then you're talking about what's going to go in Ringgold, which will probably be housing as well, although some of that, the school district has said they're probably going to try to do affordable housing for Bellevue school teachers, which I think is wonderful. But it would be nice if in here somewhere the city gave us something else, like a community center, or something up here on the hill to help us out a little bit too.
Well, that is going to lead us into our next topic, which is neighborhood area planning. I think they're exciting. A lot of people have questions, but let's remember that.
Can we finish the one in the corner? Because she's been waiting for a while.
Sure, absolutely. I'm not cutting anybody up. I just want to transition to the both.
Just one comment to add. I know you're not in charge of traffic, but just to take note and understand that my husband and I have spoken directly with the Bellevue PD that patrol the main road here, and they've said that they've been called on by the city, by the community because of the traffic that's cutting through from Coal Creek
Right.
and the
Yes.
freeway and
Here,
vice versa. And that's not even people that live in this community. So to not expand or have a plan that you can share with us around how you're going to take care of that additional traffic is like inexcusable. We need that before we can accept something going into.
There's also the growth management. I'm glad you said that. There's the Growth Management Act, and it requires infrastructure concurrently, meaning that infrastructure is built, and roads and that sort of thing are included. Roads, utilities built at the time of the development or within 6 years. And Bellevue is not following through on concurrency under the GMA. And the only way that you can do that is to go and appeal that at the Growth Management, the hearing board, and that's very expensive, so people don't do it.
Thank you for speaking to us and answering our questions. I know it must be hard to be up there tonight.
Exactly.
Just before we move on to the next topic, there have been a lot of questions asked tonight. How can we get all of these topics sent to you? Because I don't know who's taking notes on this. You seem like a really smart guy and all, but there's been a lot of topics discussed tonight.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The best way to make an impact, I'll say, on this project at this point is probably to email the Planning Commission. Anne had put that Planning Commission email in her presentation. It is just planningcommission@bellevuelaw.gov. You can also find that on our website. So you just search Bellevue Planning Commission in your favorite search engine. It'll pop right up, and how to contact them will pop right up. As I mentioned, we have the Planning Commission meeting on March 26th. Those happen at 6 p.m. They're either at City Hall or you can attend those virtually. We do have comment sections at the beginning of those meetings. That comment is limited to a certain number of people. And all of the sort of rules on that can also be found on the Planning Commission websites. When there is a public hearing, we have to take every public comment that's made at that meeting. So everyone that shows up to that meeting to make comment on the proposal will be heard at that time as well. If you have questions, reach out to me. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you've got a whole lot of questions, send me an email and say, hey, I'd like to chat with you for 30 minutes. I'm quite a busy guy, but I can usually find time for you. So especially if you have a bigger group that wants to chat, I'm always happy to chat with people as well. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
I just want to make a quick mention. Anne mentioned that we have a petition in the back. Please go read the petition. What it's doing is it's asking the city to advocate on our behalf to the state legislature to slow some of this down, which they can do. It's also advocating for city council to work with staff to also down. We explained to the city council, we're residents, we have day jobs, this isn't our full-time job, and this is a lot to digest in a very short amount of time. At the end of the day, whatever happens, we feel the impact, right? So we truly need city council, our elected officials, to advocate on our behalf. And so that's what that petition asks. What it also includes is, we ask the city council to provide us a citywide transportation study before any codes and any zoning is approved, so we can understand what the traffic impact is, because once the codes and the zoning is changes, it's almost a green light for the developers to go. We need to have the transportation and traffic studies and understand what the city's plan is before any zoning or code changes happen. So that is what that petition asks.
Michelle, is there a way to get that petition outside of this room and into the greater neighborhood?
I'm working on getting electronic. Yeah. Right now it's paper and we'll get it.
And this is not going to be perfect, but we have been recording this session, and that'll be up on a YouTube channel. And so if you want to refresh what was said, that'll be available.
Along with the slides, right? The slides are
Yes, all of this presentation will be on our website, linked to our website. All right. And now I would Tone has
So
been
Deborah, I see that you're
patiently waiting.
watching. If you can
He is
tell us why the
actually
sound's
modifying
messed up, are you not hearing
our
anything?
neighborhood area plan that he stepped in for his colleague who needs to be out of town. He's prepared to just give us a little update. Neighborhood area planning is something that started last fall and has involved, the city outreaching and trying to figure out what is each neighborhood's vision and values, what do we want to be.
Thank you,
That's why I
Ann.
thought of saying it when we were talking about wanting a community center. So I'm going to let Clint speak, and if you have questions for him, that'll be great, and we are actually all right on time.
All right, good evening. Thanks, Anne, for the introduction. And thanks for the opportunity to give a quick update. Not the main event tonight, that was the previous presentations. I'm here sort of on behalf of the neighborhood area planning team. We've been here in front of you, I think at the October membership meeting. My colleagues Kate and Brooke were here to give a presentation. We have a ton of events going on, a lot of community engagement going on right now in March. We had an event back in late February, sort of right in the middle of all that tonight. So I just wanted to mainly give an update and point you to those activities that are organized and planned here in Newport in the upcoming weeks. First of all, just wanted to give you a quick update of what we've been doing since that last time we were here at the October membership meeting, but also wanted to point you, as I mentioned before, to the events that are upcoming that are great opportunities for you all to provide feedback. And I put out a lot of materials in the back. There are flyers with sort of our event series. It's focused on public spaces, also just sort of to maybe give a little bit of context and to set it apart from the other initiatives that you've heard about tonight. The other two initiatives, HOMA and Mill Housing, are centered around land use regulations, around zoning. The zoning regulations that are proposed to be changed for residential neighborhoods as well as mixed-use areas. This project, neighborhood area planning, is different. It is focused on a long-range plan, so looking out for the next 5, 10, 20 years, and includes policies that bind the city and other players to act upon the vision that you define altogether by providing inputs. So since we were, just to give an update, since we were here in October, during the fall, we've done a lot of community engagement through both virtual events and in-person events. We had an event in early December at the Swim and Tennis Club and see a lot of familiar faces, so I know that a lot of you participated in those events as well. So we were there in early December. I think we had to move it because the bomb cyclone hit in late November, so I think we had to move it out by a week or so. So we had that event. It was an in-person event. We sent out a questionnaire to every household in Newport, and we heard back from a lot of you. Hundreds of surveys were returned to us, and that all provided really important input that is that we care about, and that we also summarized in an engagement report that I've put out. I've put out about 10 copies. It's also available online. We have a web page on the city website. If you search for Great Neighborhoods, you will find it there. It has all the information linked, including the engagement report. I put out a few hard copies out there, 10 or so feel free to pick those up. But that engagement report is meant to both outline all the engagement that we've done during the fall, so October, November, December, and what we've heard. It also includes appendices about all the actual responses to the survey and other engagement that we've done and what we heard from you. And that is a great thing to pick up. I also put out a flyer just to give an overview of what great neighborhoods or neighborhood area planning, those are sort of interchangeable terms. There's a flyer out there as well that you can pick up and take with you. So, as I said, in the fall, a lot of engagement. Then we published the engagement report to summarize everything we've heard in the fall. And we also did a project update event. It was a virtual event. I think the one in Newport took place on February 27th. A lot of you were there as well, as I've heard from my colleague Kate, who can't be here tonight, as Anne mentioned. And right now, and there's a flyer out there and it would be great to see you all at these upcoming events. There's a community workshop this Saturday at Newport Heights Elementary School. It starts at 10 a.m. and it goes until 12:30. And it's sort of a drop-in event. You don't need to be there right at 10. It's time for you within those 2.5 hours to drop in, and we would like to hear your input about specifically public spaces. So that can be streets, so there's not private property, but it's like streets, trails, natural areas, or shared public spaces, and how you would like to see those spaces improved and strengthened and to better embody the identity that Newport has. So we have a set of interactive engagement activities where you can share your preferences of how those public spaces, what they should look like, how they should evolve over time. So it will be really great to see you all Saturday morning at the elementary school, the Newport Heights Elementary School. We also have some other activities. I think we have another pop-up event on Thursday, March 27th, here at the Newport Apartments. It's all in the flyer. I know this is a lot of information that I'm throwing out there. You've already heard a lot of information also from my colleagues. But there's a flyer out in the back, so please pick that up. And all the information is also available online on the city website and on Engaging Bellevue. And then last and not least, we have, because a plan, a neighborhood area plan, includes policies, and we are developing policies based on the input that you've provided today. Again, that input that you provided is summarized in that engagement report that we put out. We're also developing policies to be included in the plan. Policies around neighborhood identity, policies around neighborhood connectivity and sort of the ease of getting around your neighborhood. But also about natural areas, which are very important to Newport's identity, and third places, so places where the community can gather. I've put a board out in the back that has those sort of initial draft policies available, visual, and I put out comment cards, so you can, if you feel we got something wrong, we didn't hear you right, or you feel like something is missing completely from what is shown on the board, please let us know. I'll stick around a little bit longer and I'll collect the cards. But also we'll have that same information available on Saturday and next week on Thursday when we have, or on the 27th when we have a pop-up event at the Newport Apartments. So don't feel like this is your only opportunity to give feedback. We'll be here in Newport throughout March, and if you cannot make those events, you can always reach out to us online. Yes.
So, Toon, I was just wondering, because you were on that virtual meeting the 27th, if you could just summarize what you guys have heard so far from Newport residents about what's important to them, that sort of thing, because there's a lot of good information there.
Yes, that's a good question. I was actually not on that meeting.
Oh, I thought you were. Sorry.
And I would also defer to my colleague Kate, who is like, so we do sort of a parallel process in Crossroads, and I lead that process there. So I'm more, familiar with the community input there, and I've been less directly involved with the Newport process. I would say, but I don't want to just leave it at that. I would say that what we've heard, if you pick up the engagement summary report that's in the back, that does a good job at the very start of the report of outlining what we heard and sort of thematically organized. So you don't need to go through hundreds of survey responses to sort of get a sense of what you all have mentioned through engagement. In the report, it's outlined fairly well. And we've tried to, the policies that are on the board right now, those are meant to reflect your input. So that's also a way how you can see, okay, what have community members, like the community at large here in Newport, what have they shared in the process today? Anne?
I have a question, which is, I don't really understand how all of this interacts. The neighborhood area planning, great neighborhoods, are these, what,
Yeah, aspirational in the sense that they are long range, and long range is like sort of for the like time horizon that can be 5, 10, 20 years away from now. So for instance, the comprehensive plan is a good example of another long range plan. It has a lot of policies that you won't see immediately like physical projects or developments or improvements done by either the city or developments, like private developments from homeowners or developers for like commercial developments. You won't see it immediately materialize, but it's something, all those projects, all those improvements, all those plans that are based on the comprehensive plan, and the neighborhood area plans are part of the comprehensive plan, they all need to sort of adhere to that.
So if that governs the city's actions, and then the land use code governs private sector actors? It's the interaction that is.
Yeah, no, I can explain it a
You know,
little.
it seems like the homeless, for example, in middle housing.
Yeah.
Just, out there in a different universe saying, we're gonna do this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
And we have this other now thing that is, as I said, aspirational and doesn't really govern what developers do, for example.
Yeah, sure. No, I can back up a little bit. So the comprehensive plan was comprehensively updated over the last couple of years and was adopted by council in the fall of last year. The comprehensive plan includes all the neighborhood area plans, and the comprehensive plan has 2 volumes. Volume 1 is about the citywide policies, and it is broken up into different elements. It's, for instance, about housing, it's about human services, it's about transportation, it's about the climate, and there's also an element, the land use element. And the land use element, and there's a map included in that with future land use designations, that is really sort of the linking pin between like zoning or our land use code and a comprehensive plan. And then in volume 2 are all the neighborhood area plans that go a little bit deeper into what are specifically relevant themes, especially focused around public spaces in the different neighborhood areas. And Bellevue has 16 different neighborhood areas. And right now, we're updating the neighborhood area plans in 2 neighborhood areas at a time. So, for instance, right now we're doing Newport and Crossroads. The plans that are right now in place date back, I think they're about 30 years old or even a little older than that. But again, the land use element and the future land use map, that is really what links the comprehensive plan, sort of the policy, the long-range plan for the city, with our land use code. And the land use code sets parameters about what you can build and how you can...
You're welcome, Deborah. It was a last-minute decision.
Yeah, it's to implement the comprehensive plan, and it needs to be consistent with that citywide comprehensive plan. Yeah.
So what predates the land use code, though, again, as I was mentioning in that, is the restricted covenants, which are an article of the incorporation of the plats, the addendums, the additions, and so on. They're pretty clearly spelled out. I'm curious, how is it that I have to work with the fact that 70% of this city has restricted covenants that protect the use of single-family homes?
I can't add much more than what Matthew has said before. I can only...
saying staff has done nothing at all with all this to look into 70% restricted of the use of the city as prescribed on the face of their plans?
So I can only say that there are agreements in place that can be more restrictive about how you use private property, and those agreements are between private parties, and the city is not one of those parties. And that can be in practice.
You can't change it without a vote of the people in addition. So if you have some 200 homes in addition, you have to have a majority vote to change.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
So those covenants or those private agreements between property owners, they are, the city cannot, they cannot enforce them, but also it's not the zoning is sort of a separate sphere. So how that plays out in practice can be more restricted by a private contract to which the city is not a party. So it's then between the private parties to enforce the contract through the courts. And
So
that
there's
in
the court
practice,
battle.
again, be more restrictive than what the city's land use code would allow for.
But we would have to lawyer up and enforce it.
How do you enforce 1110 then?
That's not between private parties, is it?
It's a state law that has to go into effect by July 1st. It's state law. There's no slowing it down. It's state law. So, I've only been banging on homes for 50 years now. So, I kind of have to follow rules and regulations, including that which is in a documented class.
So the city can ask for an extension on that. And what happens is there are some minimum standards written into the law, into 1110. And so it's a model code, minimum model code. So if the city of Bellevue does not get theirs in by June 30th, which we're asking them not to, so that they can slow down, then the model code that's in there will kick in, which is the minimum standards, which is way less than what the staff says.
I want to make it very clear before we go further in this conversation. 1110 does not override private companies.
Thank you.
That's all.
Yeah, except that we have to sue.
Yeah.
I see your point, yeah.
Yeah, who's gonna enforce it?
Oh, I have an online question.
We would ask our governors to enforce our governments that are on all our laws.
I have an online question from Anne, and Anne would like to know, what are the public areas in Newport Hills besides Newport Hills Park? The parks, basically. What are the public areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. So all the natural areas are public property. The streets, all the public right-of-ways are public. So yeah, we're looking at all those spaces that are not privately owned. And so that's like the different parks. We have like I think there's a mini neighborhood park, Woodlawn Park, and then like the public right-of-way, that is all included in that, which is all public property, including like city-owned assets, although that's fairly limited in Newport, I believe.
I have a question. In terms of the way that the NAPA works for Bellevue, does Bellevue have a set of design guidelines that basically direct architectural styles, setbacks, public use, thoroughfares? I guess what I'm starting to think is that you're doing a lot of work to hold for people what they want to see. And Seattle has a required design guidelines that you have to meet in order to include these neighborhoods. Is there one for Bellevue?
I'm going to look at my colleagues from Development Services who are more experts on the land use code.
So in essence, I mean, the land use code itself is a design guideline, right? It sets out where you can put your building, how tall your building can be, what your building can be used for. There are also specific neighborhoods in Bellevue that have specific design guidelines. So for example, downtown has a very specific set of design guidelines. Right now we have a district called the Community Retail Design District, which applies to places like Newport Hills, which has some design guidelines as well, which we carry through for HOMA. A lot of the time, places where you see in our land use code where there's sort of a little acronym at the beginning. So Eastgate, for example, has an Eastgate district. Factoria has its own district. Those often contain their own design guidelines as well. It ranges from not particularly prescriptive to quite prescriptive in downtown. There are some changes to that have just happened. There was another state law, which I know you all are super happy to hear about more state laws, that required that all of our design guidelines must be clear and objective. So you can't have a subjective design guideline. That was sort of aimed at Seattle. So basically anything that was like, you should have windows that are attractive, for example. We can no longer have a requirement that says that because it's not clear and objective. So we have to say, for example, on the ground floor, you have to have a certain percent of the ground floor must be transparent. There must be windows. We can still do that, but we have to be objective with it. So we do have those. They're embedded in the land use code. The land use code in itself is often sort of loose design guideline, if you want to say it that way, and then there's specific areas that have much more stringent design guidelines.
So does that land use code also cover like the aesthetics, the materials that are used?
Sometimes, often not. There are certain areas that are, again, much more sort of prescriptive. The Grand Connection area in downtown is a great example of that. That's much more prescriptive. Some of the areas have looser sort of material requirements. There's several sections of the code that talk about durable materials, for example. There's sections of the code that talk about having non-reflective materials. There's things like that. We generally wouldn't go as far as saying every building in this district must be brick, for example.
Right. Thanks, Matthew. Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So you're going through the neighborhood area policy exercise, right? So say people come on Saturday and the big input is, I want more trees in Newport Hills. We don't want to lose any of our green space in Newport Hills. I don't know if traffic, but we don't want any more congestion in Newport Hills, right? That's the feedback that you hear. How do you marry that with zoning that is now requesting lots potentially being split, lots being developed, which is going to take down our trees? If Ringgold becomes housing, that's a lot of open green space that goes away. It's private, but everybody uses it, right? How do you marry what our desire is and a policy, and is the policy more enforceable than the code changes, or does the code change override the policies that you're now gathering from the neighborhood?
No, that's a really good question. So you have like the policies set like a direction for the future, and our land use code needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, of which like the neighborhood area plans, including the one for Newport, needs to be consistent with. There's also some internal consistency within the comprehensive plan and the different elements. So the neighborhood area plan for Newport, but also for Crossroads and any other neighborhood area plan that is in volume 2 of the comprehensive plan, needs to be consistent with the citywide policies that Bellevue has adopted in the fall. So, for instance, you couldn't go against you couldn't, for instance, say like, oh, we're not maybe doing like middle housing because that's a state mandate also that the city as a whole needs to comply with. You cannot sort of carve out and go in a separate direction than the city as a whole has set for itself. And then secondly, there are our plan, our neighborhood area plan, and the policies that are sort of drafted and up on the board. They are specifically focused on certain elements that all have to do with public spaces and are less about how private property is used, which is more determined by also the land use element in the comprehensive plan and the land use code that implements the comprehensive plan. So for some of the things about how much development we would see, it would be a little bit, there would be not so much like overlap between the neighborhood area plan and the land use code in that sense.
So like the tree canopy, last I heard it was 40%, I don't know if that's increased. That's a citywide 40%. I would assume private property has to adhere to the tree canopy, right? The citywide, it's not just public space, correct?
Yeah, so specifically for trees, I think it was sometime in 2024, there was a update to the land use code specifically around trees and also protecting trees, like tree retention when new developments come in, so that existing trees on a property are preserved. So that is something that happened in 2024, and that was also an sort of an outcome of the city saying like we want to increase the tree canopy across the city, and that land use code amendment that changed to our land use rules was really meant to also implement that and make sure that we get closer to attaining that goal that was set. Yeah. Heidi.
Oh, so I wanted to start my comment by acknowledging that I understand that much of what you have to do is driven by mandates from the state, the bills that are passed, 1110, that sort of thing, which is why it's important. I think, Anne, to your point about the lot splitting bill this year, I think it's 1096, same sponsor, Andrew Barkus. So it passed the House and it's on to the Senate now, and it's already had a hearing in the Senate Housing Committee. So we might be able to put some information up about that, but a lot of the people that are pushing that through down in Olympia live in rural legislative districts that won't be impacted by what they're trying to make you and I do. My question, though, Toon, is So we waited a long time to do our neighborhood area plan update. We were really excited about that, especially after the comp plan was adopted in December, keeping our commercial district at low rise 1, which was 2 to 4 stories. I remember Jennifer Robertson, when she was on council, specifically rallied for that on our behalf. And what I'm feeling like is we're doing all this work, giving all this input on the neighborhood area plan update, but we're being sandwiched in between HOMA on the neighborhood centers, and then the middle housing bills. So what are we really doing with the neighborhood area plan update? Because it seems to me, and I've said this in October, that those two other things will essentially decide the outcome of our neighborhood area plan update, because you've got the residential section that's being decided over here, you've got the neighborhood center stuff over here. What are we actually doing other than deciding what kind of street trees we want in our neighborhood area plan?
Yeah, I understand your question and your concern. Neighborhood area planning is a long-range plan that is focused on our public spaces. And yeah, there are other initiatives, both coming from the city, but also part like state mandates that are, and I acknowledge that they are impactful, or they could be impactful. And yeah, there's like a multitude of initiatives that the community is asked to weigh in on, and one of them is neighborhood area planning, which is more of a long-range plan. So I can understand that to some extent the focus might be more on changes in land use regulations that could have a more immediate impact than what gets built in your neighborhood in Newport Hills. So yeah, I can acknowledge that I can really, I think part of that, or not part of that, but like we have the scope for neighborhood area planning, which is really in public spaces, and just acknowledging that there's a lot of other initiatives out there as well that are not sort of subsumed by neighborhood area planning, but are sort of separate from that.
I'm a little late to the party, but I don't quite understand what is something specific that the city of Bellevue is doing for Newport Hills neighborhood under the neighborhood area planning. Is there a specific project in mind? Anything at all other than discussion of long-range planning?
Yeah, so I would say that the long-range plan, so the neighborhood area plan, would set the stage for the next 20 years, and that.
I mean the next 1 or 2 years. Is there actually something going to happen?
So that is a good question about implementation. So how would this plan be implemented? I cannot specifically pinpoint to projects in the next 1 or 2 years that would come to fruition in Newport. I can only say that, within the next 20 years there will be parks improvements, transportation improvements, or capital improvement plan that would have to also be aligned with the neighborhood area plan for Newport. But I cannot say like, oh, we have X amount of dollars allocated to these 2 specific improvements that will come to your neighborhood like next year, right?
I appreciate that. We're in our 46th year in Newport Hills. When we moved in, we were told by government that some parks and improvements were just around the corner. We're still waiting.
I would be interested, and we could also do this offline, what those improvements were that were, because I think, if those improvements are still relevant, or still something that the community would like to see, I would love to hear that and have that be reflected also in our planning work, so we take note of that.
A community center. On the hill, that's a community center for us.
I think our policies do reflect the need for community gathering spaces in Newport. So I hope we heard you there. And again, we would love your feedback if there's anything that you feel is missing from what is on the board right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Matthew. You still? Yes. Thank you. No, really, thank you very much for coming. I'm gratified to see the engagement anyway by Newport Hills residents, and we expect that the city will be responsive as it has been in the past, and so thank you very much. that it is time for the proposed bylaw amendments. I'm sorry. The bylaws are bad, and they need to be updated. And I have lost my notes on that. What we have on the screens is an attempt to show you what the existing bylaw says and what the proposed changes are. And I'm going to just bang through this. You're not asked to vote on this tonight. If any of this makes you think thoughts and you'd like to convey them, there are cards in the back. Just write us a note. But I'm going to bang through this quite quickly.
Anne, I'm going to suggest that, because we have people watching online and it's really hard for me to get focus in, so that when we load these, do we have these on our website already?
They are already on the website, not in this format, but this presentation will also be on the website.
Okay, because I would suggest, I'm just not going to be able to get that so that people can see it. I would suggest,
They should go to the website. Anybody that was a member previously should have received an email with both these proposed bylaw changes and an explanatory document, which is what I'm about to bang through here. And those documents are posted on our website already. And this presentation with the nice pretty colors will also be posted on the website. So nobody needs to feel any pressure to have an opinion about these bylaws right now, but our bylaws require that I tell you about them, okay? So, Article 3, Section 2. The change would permit certain offices, president, vice president, secretary, to be shared by two people. You see that oftentimes like in the PTA. Nobody wants to be the president, but if there's two of them. So that's just as a practical matter, that is a change that we're proposing. Article 3, Section 3 would prohibit multiple household members from serving simultaneously on the board. A board of directors is supposed to be the opinions and judgment of individual people. And if you have multiple household members, you might have people not using their independent judgment.
Nah, we'll just get you guys to look at it.
Per member. So that is that change. Article 4, there is a reference in there to the handbook. That is obsolete, and the change suggested is to take it out. Put what needs to be in from the handbook. It was things like, what does the treasurer do? So put that in the bylaws and forget about the handbook. On that same topic, Article 4, there are a number of changes in Section 4 that clarify exactly what the treasurer's duties are. In Article 4, Section 5, we've added specific expectations for the trustee positions. We count on our trustees to do things like distribute that door hanger, help at events like this. So to make that, to just spell it out in the bylaw so that people know what they're getting into, and if they're not doing it, it's objective. Article 4, Section 8, expand and modernize the provision on access to shared accounts, records, and facilities. It just says records and documents right now, and obviously we have online things, we have storage unit keys, all kinds of things. Article 5, Section 2, loosen the timing for membership meetings and add a quorum requirement. The current bylaws say there has to be a meeting in March, and there has to be a meeting in October, particularly during the COVID years and just following, sometimes it doesn't happen until November. So rather than make us in violation of our bylaws, we change that. Both the members and the directors have quorum requirements currently that aren't really a requirement. It says whoever shows up is a quorum, which isn't legally sufficient. So there are provisions added to make the quorum requirements legally sufficient. Article 4, Section 4 is from the governing statute. It talks about what the requirements are for special meetings of members. Article 5, Section 9. This is actually a change that the state made, I think, over the back of COVID to allow both these meetings and board meetings to be held by remote means like Zoom. You can already have directors' meetings by phone if everybody can hear everything. But if your bylaws say that you can have your meetings by Zoom, and then the board decides to do that, the statute says you can do that, but it has to be in the bylaws, so that's that. Article 5, Section 11 are notice requirements for the Zoom meetings. That's in the statute. Article 5, Section 12, to allow the board to act by unanimous consent. This is actually already in the law, but it's not in our bylaws, so it's in there now as a marker to say you can do that if necessary. Article 6, Section 7, delete the provision on voting for bylaw amendments because bylaw amendments are covered elsewhere. Article 6, Section 8, delete the provision on amending the handbook since we're deleting the handbook. Article 7, Section 3, provide for successive terms for president. Right now, the existing bylaws say you have to have, somebody is the vice president, somebody is the president, somebody is the past president, and the expectation is that the vice president will step up as president, and the outgoing president will be available for a year as past president. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way, right? So the wording that we're proposing in the new bylaw just provides for that. If you can't do it that way, then do it this way. Article 7, Section 6 is a provision that talks about declaring a board member's seat vacant. And that's basically we're kicking you off the board because you've got a conflict of interest or something. And the something was pretty squishy. So the proposed change would make those criteria more objective to say you need to do this, this, and this. If you haven't done this, this, and this, then the board can vote to declare your seat vacant and hopefully get somebody who will come to the meetings or whatever in that seat. Article 7, Section 7, there's just a reference to people who might, to terms of office that would be 2 years, which doesn't apply anymore. Article 8, Section 2, simply updates the list of standing committees. The standing committees have been, there used to be a whole lot of them. You know, we have a youth committee and a public safety committee, and what we've done since, that's just a lot of committees, and we've kind of munched them down into functional areas, and we actually have someone serving as the head of those committees. And then the big one, and I don't think this is controversial, but our current bylaw amendment procedure requires this and requires sending and having feedback and then doing this again and then having a vote. And I urge you all, you should have a copy of this in your email or it's on the website to read it and just go, what? So that's what my background is in law, and I read it and went, what? So this is an attempt to clarify what it is that's supposed to be done. It's also a proposal to split. The state statute says the board of directors can just change the bylaws. They don't have to ask the members, they can just change the bylaws. And what we've proposed is a split between things that affect the members' rights, like your right to approve the budget or your right to vote for the board. And those would be subject to approval by the members, the same, with a simplified procedure, but approval by the members. Other kinds of changes, like which committees to have, the board could do by itself. But notice would be given and this and that. So I encourage you all to read the details, but that's essentially what we're proposing. And that's all. That's
That is not all.
Take longer than it did, and thank God it didn't. All right.
And I just want to say thank you to the two Anns, Ann and Ann, because that was a heavy lift. That and Ann Rittenhouse, Ann Bashir.
Especially Mrs. Rittenhouse, she pulled that together in not very much time. So, and we also very much want to thank our hosts here. The Newport Hills Community Church has been just supporting the club and supporting the neighborhood as a whole. They do so much for the neighborhood. The reason the tables are like this is that every Wednesday evening they open their doors and say, we'll feed you dinner, come on by. So that we left the tables in place, that's why. So yay, Newport Hills Community Church. And last but not least, well, unless you all have something to say, I'm reminding you about the events that are coming up. The garden walk is cool. We have beautiful gardeners.
We need more gardeners.
We would, if you have a garden that you'd like people to go, which is not my garden, but if you have a garden that you'd like to share with the neighborhood, there's something on the back table that you can write your name down.
Or contact us at info@newporthillscommunityclub.org.
I'll say that at the end, because that applies to all of them.
Okay.
So the garden walk is June 14th. The ice cream social, a popular event, is at Woodlawn Park on July 27th. And they could probably use volunteers too. Music night is August 17th. And these people are our neighbors. They are, middle-aged guys with guitars and drums. And they're so fun. They are very fun. And they are great neighbors too. That's August 17th from 5:30 to 7:30. You guys having fun over there? Come on now. No more fun. If you would like to be involved in any way, if you can help with any of these events or anything else, if you hate the bylaws and want to tell us about it, sign up back there. And there are comment cards. If you have something to say about the bylaws, something to say in general, just write it down, put it in a little basket, and we will get back to you. So, I think, has anybody got anything else to say? Are you stupefied? No.
Oh.
I skipped the egg hunt. What did
The traffic. And we had those photos that Shannon uploaded of the traffic from today.
Yes. Oh, that's what this is.
Yes.
Well, I think everybody here already knows.
Yeah, that was this morning at 8:07. Hey, so I didn't tailgate you. But that was in the 4700 block of, I think it was 4700 block of 119th. There were 12 cars at least backed up behind me. From that point, it took me an 11 more minutes to get down and get off the hill, and I turned right onto Coal Creek. If I had gone left to 405, it would have been another 2 light cycles. And then I think Michelle took... Correct. And then I think Michelle, did you get Michelle? Oh, and then Michelle had actually taken photos of going 60th towards Lake Washington Boulevard, showing the backup from Ringdahl as heading towards.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day it's backed up from Lake Washington up 60th, up the hill, almost to Thruway. Every day getting off the hill.
Well, and there's a pileup on Lake Washington Boulevard too, trying to get to that 3-way stop. The Newcastle people are coming on Lake Washington Boulevard.
Everybody's cutting through from 405.
We've got the 240 bus.
Yeah. And it's sitting in that traffic too.
Correct. That's actually, yeah.
My counterpart, the other end, has pointed out that I forgot to mention the egg hunt, which is the thing that's coming up just next.
We need volunteers.
On April 19th, which is the day before Easter, for those who celebrate Easter. This is a totally fun event. If you've got kids, grandkids, bring them. And if you have time and want to volunteer, it's actually a fun thing to do, and you're done by noon. So,
yeah.
All right. Anything else? Anything else? All right. May I have a motion to adjourn then? Who wants to say? Yeah. And all opposed? Anybody opposed? All right. Thank you all for coming.
Woo! All right. Go here. Everybody that's at home watching, thank you for putting up with my shaky videography here. This was actually not planned to video this. I remembered at the last minute. We do have a YouTube channel, but the terms have changed, and you're supposed to have 50 subscribers to upload to YouTube, so I had to do the Facebook Live. But I appreciate your patience. I'm going to hit finish and start the upload process soon. So thank you for tuning in, and make sure that you submit questions, comments to info@NewportHillsCommunityClub.org. Go Newport Hills!